I'm still trying to get that off my screen. There I go. There you go. Okay. And it looks like, I don't know if Alex is fully plugged in, but it looks like we're all here. So I am going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Health and Human Services Board for September 23rd. I'm looking at the roll of members in front of me, and I see that everyone is here. Thank you all. So let the record show that we have a quorum and all members are present. We have minutes from our, I'm sorry, Gary.
I so move.
You beat me to it. Minutes. Yes, we have a motion and the minutes are from August 26th. Is there a second? Jody, Supervisor Cromery seconds. Thanks very much. Any additions or corrections? No one sees. If not, all in favor of approving these minutes from August 26th, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Aye. Any opposed? Right, minutes are approved. Krista, do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
All right, no public comment. Next meeting date is October 28th, again, the fourth Thursday. We can come dressed in Halloween garb to amuse ourselves. Anybody have any problems with that?
No.
Dr. Hall.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to need to be absent. My son has his honors choir concert in Madison that evening, so I won't be able to attend.
Tell Gavin that we wish we were all there.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. All right, next up, Veterans Services Office Staff Report and Financial Report. Greg.
Good evening, everyone. I'll start with the staff report. That's the memo formatted document. And I'll just start with local activity. We conducted an outreach event. It's kind of been an ongoing outreach event the majority of the month of September, partnering with the Dunn County Historical Society. And again, I'll plug their facility over there. It was a great partnership. There's a lot of great items over there, and so I'd encourage anybody even to not, to go over there, just check it out anytime. I was kind of blown away as well to have a nice facility like that right here in Dunn County. I think certainly we're going to try to partner with them again in the future on a few other activities. Just makes sense. So this last part of that outreach event, the culminating event that I would identify as we had a panel discussion this last Sunday. We had 4 Vietnam veterans. One of them is one of your counterparts, Mr. Jim Tripp, that was part of that. And it wasn't well attended, but we had recorded it, just an audio recording. It was with the panel. We led them through a number of questions, and the whole focus was about really kind of what was the environment like prior to them entering service, and kind of that local, really a local focus. And then, and just to not go over the whole event, but very common story with the four gentlemen, because they're highly successful in their own right, but every one of them had a common theme that they probably shouldn't have started college right out of high school, which I thought was interesting, and that kind of led them into the military, encourage them, let's say. But it was a common theme, and also kind of in closing, each of them would identify that that's really helped shape their life with commitment and patriotism and a lot of other factors. So it was nice listening to that, and I learned quite a bit. And I know each of the panelists that were part of that. So it was you peel the onion layer back a little bit more, and you get to see a little bit more how a person has become who they are, which is really, really nice to be part of that. On the state benefit wise, and I think Jessica Stark from our office last month, I think I wanted to keep this on there. A lot of activity this last month surrounding which is technically called retrograde operations from Afghanistan, and there was a big uptick certainly regarding a lot of feeling regarding that process, which I give a great credit to the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs and the federal VA, because immediately when they seen what was happening, they sent out email to their listserv saying, hey, we're here, we got you, we have resources, because it not only impacts our current veterans who really kind of more directly lived through this process and a lot of the work that had happened over in the Middle East, but also those that remember the evacuation of Saigon. And we have quite a few veterans in our community that were on some of those Navy ships that were helping with that evacuation. So it really triggered a lot of thought and a lot of emotion. But I give the both federal and the state level a lot of credit, saying, hey, we're here, we'll listen, we got resources for you if you need help processing these things. And there was no shortage of individuals contacting our office either, and still. And there's some efforts being done. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Team Rubicon.
Yes.
Yeah, Team Rubicon is a veteran organization, nonprofit formed by veterans to still continue to serve and give. That's, I think, a common theme that you'll see out of a lot of veterans, that there's a continual commitment to serve in a variety of capacities. And this is their way. And so they're helping spearhead a lot of donations and stuff for the refugees that have come to the U.S.
Mhm.
And I know there's a lot of local individuals that are helping with those efforts as well, because we have quite a few of the refugees down at Fort McCoy. I was just down there a few weeks ago, and pretty much every area is off limits.
Oh.
So, or encouraged not to go. You know, their general order of no cameras, no nothing, just to help protect everyone. So. It's good to see those efforts being done as well. You know, these non-governmental organizations, again, stepping up, which they always have in lots of incidents. On the federal benefits side, we've in that process, everything is reactionary and it kind of chases its tail. So when you have a backlog in a certain benefit, efforts are put on trying to resolve that. You resolve that, but you take resources from other areas. So then there's a backlog there. So it's just, you just chasing the tail. And right now we have a backlog in appeals within the federal VA, lengthy appeals, 2.5 to 3 years in some instances. Which can have a significant impact on somebody that needs these resources. But the upside is a lot of effort was placed on initial claims, but now they're going to have to divert resources to catch up on all those appeals. And a major part of the backlog is the records get requested from the Federal National Archives down in St. Louis, Missouri. And the issue is with COVID, they sent everybody home, but you can't complete a claim. They need resources out of there. Then they brought back limited staff. And so that again is another reason. I think Congress has told them, please get folks back to work so that we can get some of these things resolved. And so that's one side of it. And we've also seen some inconsistent examinations, which then result in appeals. So it's just things that thankfully we're able to monitor because of the technology, and so we can get ahead of some of this stuff and resolve it quick. And so that's our partnership, because no claim is really owned by us and no claim is really owned by the veteran. We're a team in making sure that we resolve and accomplish what we're hoping to do, that end result. And financially, as far as our 2021 budget, there's nothing significant to report budget related. And I'll go into more details regarding the budget with the expenditure as well as the revenue handout that you all have. Still working and partnering with a group to get the eternal flame, say, resurrected, because it has been removed or not in place in the old building. And so we should start seeing some progress on that now that the highway department is working on the front parking lot. They're going to bring it up to grade, the 800 square feet, and extend the sidewalk. And then this year we're hoping to get all 3 of the flag poles placed, or one moved. The federal flag should be moved over to that site, and then we have to do a little bit more fundraising then to finish things up with getting the granite memorial, because it's about a 6-month wait on that. But we've got a team that's working on it, and we're just one partner in it now, rather than leading, which I would suspect kind of leading, I suppose. but so there should be some progress on that before the end of this calendar year. And then we'll start a capital campaign. Then I think when you see a little bit of a visual, it's easier to bring out the wallet. The next thing, again, regarding our emergency preparedness, COVID, business as usual. Still meeting with veterans, and we fully intend on continuing to do that. And we got 2 of our volunteers still in place that is extremely helpful answering the phones, especially when there's an uptick, certainly in work. So I take any questions that any board members would have regarding this part of my report.
Any questions for Greg? If not, Greg, go ahead, please.
Okay, so the next item I'll cover is look at the expenditures report, and just for everybody's clarification, we have three cost centers within our budget. One is kind of our main operations. The other is Veterans Relief, or Soldiers and Sailors Relief Fund, and the other is a $10,000 grant from the state of Wisconsin. And nothing significant in that, but again, clarification: there's three cost centers within our expenditures, much less than the other reports that you'll hear tonight, which I'm thankful for. So with that, the kind of move to the revenue, and again, educational purposes, we're probably about a 95% tax levied program with the county. We've got the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs grant that is $10,000 that supports the program, and then we get some transportation reimbursement, which I anticipate at this fiscal year with the state will be less, and that's it's typically anywhere from $700 to $800 of reimbursement. Any questions regarding any of that description for the expenditures and revenues?
It looks like you'll come in well within budget.
Yeah, we're 10 years we've done it. The expectation should be that it'll definitely come in budget. We just, unlike some of the other programs, we have less variables, that can impact our program. If there's no questions regarding that, I'll move into our activity report, which again, I've been including our 2020 numbers and then our 2021, so that it's everyone can look at, and if they have any specific questions about some of the categories. And it might, my goal is always to try to quantify the efforts that we do, and then of course have a comparison, because it means nothing if you don't have a comparable to look at. while you review any of those numbers, if you have any questions, I'll go over the impact statement. So with this, the impact statement, what I wanted with this one, this is an email that our benefit specialist had received in the office, and this is a daily occurrence, and just to give a very clear snapshot of what happens on a daily basis. And I feel like that's my responsibility to inform the board that governs us on what happens each day. And I think that impact statement is our method to do that. And so this essentially just identifies clearly that we had just an initial contact with somebody come into the office, and with that initial contact and providing good customer service, we try to look at things holistically, not, because everybody's got a question, but there might be a little bit more to that detail. And if you read through the email, basically the veteran is at retirement age and just wanted a few questions about how to access some health care, how to use a few things. But the end result was Jessica was able to help this veteran not only get some medical, but also get things identified that the military had injured his ears. So then he therefore has no co-payments for his health care from the VA because of that, able to get free hearing aids, which there's no insurance company that exists that provides hearing aids. Now this gentleman's going to be able to get free hearing aids, which are very good hearing aids from the VA. And as he kind of identified in that last line, things with retirement and fixed income look a little bit brighter after this interaction, because when you're on a fixed income, especially with inflation right now, things cost a lot more, and wages a lot of times don't keep up, or the cost of living doesn't keep up with that. So this is a daily occurrence and gives you a little bit of a snapshot. I have one other thing that's not on this impact statement. However, I anticipate having information hopefully by our next report. So there's an upside when you have old records, and if you hire a company to come in and just scan everything in. The upside is you don't have to touch it, it's done, and you can just go in when you want and electronically look at it. The downside is you don't get to do any quality control check on those old files. We are entering in and doing all of our files electronically on our own, because it really can't justify trying to ask for money to do that. But the upside is you'll find mistakes that were made by the federal VA potentially, or other things that you can correct. And benefit specialists had found a denied claim from 1986 to a surviving spouse that her husband had passed away from lung cancer. And the VA had denied that. However, lung cancer was then added because this veteran was in country Vietnam, which is lung cancer is an identified condition from the defoliants, that better known as Agent Orange, that they're exposed to. The end result is Jessica tracked the surviving spouse down from almost 30 years ago, still living northern Dunn County. Said, hey, do you want to check this out? The surviving spouse was not remarried. Said, yep, let's do it. We're looking at the upwards of about $500,000 to $600,000. That is the estimate on that, because of that mistake that the VA made, because they're supposed to. It's called a Niemer law, that if you applied for something and it was denied but later added as a condition, and not to get into too much detail, but that would have never been caught if we would have hired a company to do that. And so the way I mentioned that to benefit specialists, I'm like, well, hell, the next 2 years, it's still worth it, even if we don't find another one like that, maybe even 3 years. So I'll have a final. I anticipate we should see what those final numbers are on that. So that's an excellent outcome. So
Really?
if is there any questions about any of the numbers in the our output for the past month or any of the other report that I've provided?
Yeah, Greg,
Yes.
I have just a comment. Thank you so much for the explanation from the federal level regarding the slow up in disability claims. And if my information is correct, which I'm sure it is, we're at about a 2-year high here on pending claims and or pending appeals and pending disability claims. So thank you for the explanation, and I hope they get that squared away.
They will, like I said, it's just kind of chasing the tail. They'll divert some resources to correct the current backlog, and then we'll get caught up. And then because you got a finite amount of resources that they have too. So we just need to do our job right, and that'll limit the need for appeals.
I think, Greg, what you relayed about that widow, super duper, and also your impact statement. Take it from an old retired guy. Hearing aids are exorbitant.
Yes.
They're out of sight.
Yeah.
And so that's for people on fixed income, that's a big deal. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Greg, for always an excellent report. And thanks to you and Jessica for this work that you do on behalf of veterans. It's just makes us all feel good to know that our veterans are being so well cared for by you and your staff. Thank you very much.
Best job in the county.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, moving on to public health. KT, are you ready? Thank you.
So you guys, just a verbal report today. We really are consumed with the amount of work that we have. And so I apologize for not having anything in print. I'm sure that you guys can find a different cure for insomnia than the packet that I gave you. So looking at where we are right now today, 5,624 cases and an additional 540 probable cases. We are really in an upswing log growth status of our infections. We are seeing, so just for comparison, we're seeing an average of almost 30 cases a day. We weren't averaging that since last December. We have hit 40 cases by onset in one day. And again, that's looking at more like November when we get to average 40 a day. So definitely consuming levels of infection. We are seeing an uptick in providers using antigen testing. So we are seeing more probable cases. Many of those antigen tests are then confirmed with a PCR case, so that there is some movement in that number between those two. But one of the other things that we are seeing is a shift in our demographics. So we are, unlike last year, seeing a very strong representation in our children. So in our kids under 9 and under, currently our active infections, about 10% of our active infections are in children 9 or younger. And then a third of our infections are in children 18 or younger. So that's different. And we're seeing spread in classrooms in a different way because we're not seeing the mitigation strategies that were really effective last year, by and large, are not adopted in our school districts. And so that's really challenging for our schools. It's really challenging for our parents. It's really challenging for our community. Just to put some kind of stories behind the kinds of cases that we're seeing, by and large, our children are typically, our infections in children are fairly mild. not always. We did have a child that was just very recently released from the hospital after a case of MIS-C, or multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children. Very grateful that the child was released after some time in Rochester. But it is really challenging for that family, of course. We are continuing to see, so additional stories, we are continuing to see the bulk of our infections in unvaccinated people, and the infections tend to be really pretty severe. And so another kind of example of things that we're seeing. So when I was contact tracing a couple of weekends ago, had a kiddo who, very, very social kiddo, probably picked it up at school, very mild symptoms. So kiddo had fever one day, a little bit of stuffiness, was tested through work, tested positive with a antigen, and then went and had a confirmatory PCR in addition to, because there was some concern about whether it was accurate or not with the very self-limiting and mild symptoms. PCR was positive. When I called the family to connect, the parent was breathless and dizzy and unable to really function. So encouraged that parent to go get tested. They were positive. Encouraged that parent to talk to their provider about monoclonal antibodies. It was really touch and go with her, with the parent. So it was important that they were able to seek medical care and talk to their doctor and turn that bend. We have another family in the county where, again, it was index case in the household was with a school-age child. Parent is in their early 50s and is on a ventilator right now. So when we talk about infection in children, then being translated to infection in families, that's what we're seeing. And we're not seeing just the oldest and most people with most comorbidities, but we're also seeing some really young people be really, really impacted. Our most recent deaths were in 2 unvaccinated people, one person in their very early 50s and one person in their early 60s. Again, not the kind of comorbidities that we would expect, and definitely very challenging for those families, and preventable, I believe. So that's kind of COVID. We have brought on 5 new contact tracers. We've brought back several contact tracers from before. I have an opening for more, and I have 6 interviews set up for next week. So really trying to increase our capacity to support specifically our schools. When we have close contacts in the classroom, we can pull those classroom rosters and we can do the contact tracing in a way that we currently are not staffed to do, to support school nurses, given some of the decisions that their boards have made. Looking at other things that are maybe not COVID related, we did have one of our managers resign this week. So that has created a pretty significant hole in our team. So in addition to some of the other stuff that I do, I'm also our health inspector for the county right now. So some days that sounds like a really good job, I gotta tell you. But we are currently hiring, and I got a fantastic number of applicants for environmental health specialist. And I am very confident that we'll be able to fill both the environmental health specialist and the environmental health manager out of that posting. So looking to move forward with that. With our public health nutrition, you may have seen our WIC director, Grace, on WEAU last night. She did an interview with them regarding the fruits and vegetable benefits at the federal level. And so really nice to highlight a face with our local programming and help people understand what their benefits are as it relates to our women, infant, and children program. So that's really good news. I think that's, let's see, talking about Any questions that you guys may have at this moment in time about anything that I shared today?
KT, may I just interject? Two related questions. At 30 cases a day, how are our staff managing? And the related question is other health providers. Where are we at capacity and so on?
Sure. So let me start with the easy one. When we look at our health system partners, and you can go to the website that Dr. Hall has shared before and that I would snip and put into your written documentation. According to the Wisconsin Hospital Association, there is one ICU bed currently available in the region out of 72. I have looked at the kind of backside resource that feeds into that. And I have shared quite openly that our regional hospitals are incredibly challenged to find rooms for people. We have had 2 hospitals in the region that are on and off divert consistently over the last couple weeks. Currently, 13 of our hospitals are at peak capacity in the region. That is the highest that I've seen. And then we are seeing an increase in COVID cases in the hospital and the ICU. And I think we're upwards towards 230 in the region. And that diminishes space for other folks that have emergent healthcare needs. And so that continues to be a significant concern. We were talking as a group of health officers in the region, and when we're that short on bed space, and the Twin City Metro is as short as they are, with less than 1% of their ICU and their med-surg beds available, that means that people go to really far places to find care. And we had somebody within the region that was actually shipped to Fargo. That's crazy.
We had
Sorry.
I just had a staff person today whose husband had a medical emergency and was life flighted to La Crosse because that was the nearest spot with capacity for him.
And that does mirror December when we had folks that we had some deaths out of La Crosse that actually took quite a bit of time to get to us because of the different processes with medical examiners. But yeah. So talking about our team, I have an amazing team that are really dedicated, but they're tired. They're really, really tired. And it feels pretty crummy when you can't get through your list of cases before you have another list that you can't get through. But really supporting them with the idea that we get there when we get there. We're still much faster than the state is, typically in the cases that we can send to the state, especially over the weekends. And, you know, again, I think people really do appreciate that kind of local touch. So people that know the local support systems and the local removal of barriers, and so that we can connect to provide something that would otherwise be a barrier to staying safely isolated, versus when it's worked by the state, it comes back to us, and then we find out that they have an emergent food need, or they have an emergent medication need. So that's talking about our staff and our hospital partners. And then, did you have any other follow-up questions that Supervisor?
Well, the follow-up, KT, is there absolutely anything that this board can do to assist you or support you or prop you up in any way?
I think that I appreciate the sentiment. I do want to keep you guys apprised of what we're doing as far as our staffing and some of our policies. One of the procedures that we are amending currently is to start with written quarantine administrative directives, so that it's coming from my office to folks that are required to quarantine as a close contact, so that we can start that process a little bit quicker. Not that anybody wants enforced quarantine or isolation, but it just gives us one more quickened step, so that if we have non-compliance, that we can move quicker. I should share with you guys that we currently are looking at potentially doing a court enforcement of isolation, working with court counsel on a non-compliant minor child already involved in the court system, so that we can keep their surrounding community safe. That is probably where I would go with that, is just to let you know that we are working on process improvement where we find a really rough edge, and we are moving through some procedures to make that expedited. But if I have policies, I'll bring them to you.
Thank you. If I'm not mistaken, Supervisor Bjork had his hand up and Dr. Hall did too, and Supervisor Cromrie. So Dr. Hall, I think I saw you first.
Hi. So thinking also about what tools you have at your disposal. So, we're at levels of COVID that are higher than what we had at this time last fall. There's no reason to think they won't continue to climb. Our trajectory is not looking good. And so in terms of at the county level, can we do a mask order for schools? At the county level, can we do, I think, so these quarantine directives, it sounds like that's kind of the first step to like officially then enforce quarantine for those in whom it's needed. It's strange with the recent school board decision because that violates state statute, right? If you knowingly allow someone who's suspected of having a disease to come into a public place. So the current Menominee School Board policy is in violation of state statute. So just wondering about what kind of county level interventions could be brought to bear, given that our hospitalizations usually peak a couple of weeks after cases peak, and cases are still going up and already our hospitals are full. So if we keep doing what we're doing, things could get severely severe, like Idaho, right? And I don't want to get there, but what are our options?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I think that as far as mask mandates go, I think that there is we'll continue to work with Corp Council to really explore that, but I think that there are some barriers, quite frankly. There's also some concern about being test cases for that kind of litigation as well. As far as tools go, I think the people power is a big thing, but one of the positions that I have asked for and that I'm going to move forward for is another public health manager on an LTE basis, really looking at supporting our contact tracing and our epidemiology. Because one of the things that I just don't have time to do is snuggle up with the data. And so really showing, a time lapse of what we saw last September versus here in these same environments with different mitigation strategies. It's something that I know that you and I have talked about, Dr. Hall, and I really don't have the manpower or woman power to pull that data. So those are tools that I'm looking to put back into my tool belt so that we can adequately make data informed decisions moving forward.
Supervisor Bjork, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm trying to read my notes and I didn't write it down very good, but there was a term that you used. Was it indigent testing or indigent treatment?
So antigen, is that the word that you're looking for?
I believe so, yes.
Sure. So antigen testing is the rapid testing that you can go and get at the Stout Community Testing Site, as well as now through many of our providers. Many folks like to leave the office knowing, if they're positive or not. There is in antigen testing for folks that are asymptomatic and positive or have symptoms and negative, a concern that might be a false result. And so there is some follow-up testing that's often done with a PCR, which is a much more reliable result.
But it's still a nasal swab?
Yes, so both of them can be, so it's basically how you collect the genetic material. So in the places that do antigen tests is just inside the nostril. So it's really, I would say, less invasive. And so many parents like to, especially with little kids and little noses, they like to do the nasal swab. PCR can be done either with a nasal swab. So our National Guard supported testing was a nasal swab PCR test, or an NP swab that really feels more like it's reaching pretty far back. There are also tests that you can get through the state's website for home testing, where they actually collect saliva, and that's where they pull the DNA from. It is a fair amount of saliva. It's like 30 mils, guys, but you can get it done that way as well. So it's just, where they're trying to take the DNA RNA from, the genetic material from. You can also do some of the fluids internal to the body. If there is a concern, they can sometimes take a gavage and test the gavage. So antigen tests are typically, that's probably way more information and quite the ramble, but that antigens are typically in the nostril, but PCRs can be in a variety of different bodily fluids.
Well done. Supervisor Cromer, you had a question or a comment.
Thank you. So my question is, KT, about contact tracing. At our peak in 2020, with the highest amount of cases in Dunn County, how many contact tracers did you have at that point? And do you feel that was a manageable amount? And it seemed like you're looking for a total of 6 right now, hiring for 1 and you have 5. So that's where I'm wondering what we were at last year.
Yes, thank you for the question. So the math is absolutely in my head, but I did not talk out loud about it. So I typically have, so last year I had 12 contact tracers, and then there were tracers from Stout as well. It's not, they aren't a full FTE. I usually hire them at what they can give, which is anywhere between 10 and 30 hours. But it is a variety of people. And so I did add 5, and I'm going to add another 6. That is going to put us at above where we were last November.
Okay.
But we didn't keep up last November, and we ended up with a surplus of cases that never were touched. And I'm committed to not have that happen again. We have a different process to where we always send a letter, regardless of whether or not we talk to them. That's new since last November because we couldn't keep up. And having more people, there aren't as many Stout contact tracers as last year. So I'm trying to really add in to compensate for that. And of course, the workload is going to be very different with our schools this year over last year. So thank you for helping me put that math more presently out there for you guys to wrap your head around.
Okay, thank you.
KT,
Other question, Ms. Barker.
so I kind of know what happened here in Menominee. I know that we are still doing contact tracing in Boyceville. I know it quite well. And does that help you? I mean, it does, doesn't it? Okay. It's nice to know that when April and I are calling in kids out of class and that it's helping. Okay. It's always
I
nice.
really can't say enough about the school nurses that work with us. They have relationships with families that are so important, and families call them literally a day or 2 days before we have the lab in WEDS. And so they're able to contact trace so much faster and limit exposure so much faster than we are. And then they know specifics about the family. So, you guys will be shocked to find this out, but people sometimes lie to us. And so, we can have a conversation with a family where they say everybody's separated and it's no problem. And then, the school nurse might know that it is a fairly, it might be a big farmhouse, but there's just one bathroom and there's just no way to separate when you've got a house set up like that. And so our school nurses really know our families in a way that help us keep other people safe. And so we can circle back to that family and say, this is what I know. This is what the state says about that. And this is really when you are able to go back and limit or go back from quarantine. So the nurses have been amazing and they're exhausted. So any love that you guys can show them or gratitude that you guys can show them, it's appreciated. But they are that first contact tracer in many, and sometimes the only contact tracer in some situations.
Any other questions of KT? Thank you. I'm sure all of us feel that way for the incredible work that you and your team are doing, keeping us all as safe as possible. Thank you so much. I don't know. I wish there was something else that we could kind of ride into the office and do, but thank you.
Absolutely. I don't believe I have anything else. If you guys are good, we'll kind of walk into financials. Okay. So what you guys have in front of you is the product of many, many hours of Sarah, Jane, and Tiffany in our Dunn County Finance Division, looking at the crosswalk between our grant awards, what's in SAP, what's in the state system of CARS, and really making sure that they align. And so you'll see that there has been a significant shift in dollars. There will continue to be work around that, but it also resulted in a fairly large budget adjustment in front of you. So 87,000, which is almost like something that DHS would put forward, not so much the health department. But really what that is taking the bits and pieces where we had budgeted for what we got the year before, but we actually got a little bit more or a little bit less, or there was a grant that was awarded that never made it into SAP, even though we had talked it through. There probably was a budget adjustment around it, but just doing some real robust housekeeping, financial housekeeping, because we were without a dedicated fiscal support for almost 6 months. So any questions about what was in your packet, either on the yellow page, looking at what we are expecting to spend out, or on the blue and green page with our expenses, recognizing that the vast majority of our expenses are really in people.
Any questions on revenues or expenses or the budget adjustment upcoming for KT? Thanks for this work. All right, I think we are ready to move on and talk about the Department of Human Services staff report. There are several things in the packet and something that Chris sent out earlier today. So Chris.
All right, so let me just do a few little brief updates, and then we'll dig into, you received one page of a PowerPoint that I put together for your viewing this evening. I have mentioned this in a number of meetings, and I just want to keep it on your radar. So I'm going to talk about it again. And we're going to see a slide that's going to talk about economic support and its impact. So when we get to that slide, you'll see that about 11% of the population of Dunn County last year received food share benefits. So 1 in 10 persons. So typically, so there's a gradient of 1 person X amount based on income, 2 people X amount based on income, and it kind of just a variety or a spread. But typically 1 person with a little bit of income. So keep in mind that you can't make a lot of money. You can't make much money at all and still receive food share benefits. If you make more, if you're a single individual and you make more than about between $8 and $9 an hour, you're not going to be eligible for food share benefits. So I just want to sort of set the idea about what's the population of people that are receiving benefits to begin with. So you all know that making even $10 an hour would be about $20,000 a year of income. So if you're making $8 or $9 an hour, you're making something less than $20,000 a year, and that's the cutoff to food share benefits. But if you're on the little bit higher side of that, for instance, if you're making maybe $1,000 to $1,100 a month, you're going to, historically, you would have received about $20 a month in food share benefits as a single individual. That number has been bumped for the last many months as a part of first COVID money, and then, first the coronavirus relief money, and then kind of various funding pots that have come through on the federal level, to the fact that many people now, many single individuals, receive about $235 a month plus a $95 supplement to that. So they are receiving over $300 a month when historically they would have received $20. And they've been receiving it for a year, 14 months, 16 months, 18 months, a long period of time. Eventually, that's going to come to an end, or some version of correction to that. And I just keep it on your radar, because that is going to be sticker shock to a lot of individuals. And we've talked about this before. If any of us received an extra $300 a month for the last 18 months, and then suddenly it was gone, all but the very best financial managers of us would recognize that as a loss. And so I just hold that out there. The other thing that's happened, and we've talked about this before as well, is on the healthcare side of things, with Badger Care, people that qualified for Badger Care back at the beginning of the pandemic have not had that qualification reviewed or verified since the beginning, and they continue to remain eligible for those benefits, and eventually that will come to an end. So again, people that have become accustomed to having something that takes care of their healthcare costs may well not qualify for that going forward in the future, and that will be another big change. So I just say those things because we're going to get to the slide that's going to talk about kind of how many people in our community that impacts, and it's not insignificant. The other thing that I wanted to share, because we went through budget last month, so our budget review last month, the other thing that I wanted to share for you was we were able to make another adjustment to our budget proposal since last month's meeting, based on a number of different things that have come to be true in the ensuing month. So we were able to reduce our levy ask for next year by about $300,000. And these are the things that resulted in that. We received an notice of our allocation for youth aids, which covers youth justice costs. That had a slight increase of a little over $20,000. We received notice that sometime, hopefully no later than early in 2022, we will no longer have responsibility for subsidized guardianships for children that are placed outside of the home in a long-term arrangement. That could be upwards of about $125,000, but we conservatively took about $70,000 out related to that. We relooked at what our spending has been on our substance use, the money that we forward through on contract to Arbor Place for substance use treatment. And so in February, as you may recall, in February, residential treatment, where your inpatient treatment, became a Medicaid card service. So we were able to reduce spending the full cost of residential treatment for people who didn't have a payment source to only having to pay the room and board rate. So our expenditures in substance use treatment have diminished dramatically. And so we took about $100,000 out from that. Our psychiatrist, who Dr. Hall is well acquainted with because it's her father-in-law. Our psychiatrist chose to finally decide he was going to be retired.
He's 80.
Yeah, at 80. And Dr. Bruce Rhodes. And so we were able to work with the state of Wisconsin to revise some variances that we have for what type of medical professional can cover certain things and reduce our need for psychiatry somewhat dramatically. We have a nurse practitioner, Kara Helmer, who works with us about 2.5 days a week. And she can cover almost everything we do. We have to have a small contract, and our former psychiatrist, Dr. Bill Platz, is going to come back and cover those small amounts of costs, but we were able to reduce some of the costs with that as well. In addition, just as an example of how sort of staffing changes make a significant amount of difference in expenses, we had a behavioral health services manager who took a job in Eau Claire County. We promoted from within a senior social worker into that management role, leaving her position vacant. And when we rehire her position, it will rehire at a basic social work level, which is $10 an hour less. So in and of itself, just that one personnel change from a higher paid position will result in about $20,000 next year in savings. So, so all of those things combined, and all things that we were able to vet more thoroughly since the last budget review, resulted in about a $300,000, little $317,000, I think, is actually the amount of the levy ask reduced from what you saw last month. Any questions about that?
And just for board members, I don't think they've been updated yet, but the departmental budgets are on and will be updated on the county website.
Yeah, Keith thought this week, but I'm not sure if that
I haven't
happened.
seen them be updated yet. I will send out, I or Chris or somebody will send you a link so you can take a look at those updated budgets.
The one other thing that I would say is that sort of in the weird fluctuations that we're in on kind of all things. So interestingly, this is just one of the little sides. My brother said that he went to schedule an oil change at a local car dealership, and he can't get in until October 11th because of a shortage of supplies for oil changes. So in the weird world in which we live in, which is difficult to get an oil change, I think it will be interesting to see as we move at some point in time to another side of COVID, hopefully the backside of COVID, what our expenses actually end up looking like. I still don't totally understand what's happened. There's a lot of money in the system, but our general kind of package of expenses don't typically shift dramatically. And so we aren't spending money in travel. People aren't going places. They're not going off to training. A lot of our training is virtual, so our training costs have reduced dramatically. Those are kind of anticipated costs. But I have a hypothesis that there's a bit of perhaps creativity and resilience that COVID has brought about as people are working from home and maybe have a little bit more mental capacity to do some brainstorming and problem solving. And they're just being more creative with the solutions with kids and families and individuals. And it's a hypothesis. I don't even know how to prove whether it's true or not, except to say that our costs as a general rule, and we'll see that when we look at our financial report, are down and have stayed consistently down through last year and through this year, even though we're still providing a lot of service. So anyway, for whatever that's work, that's a good thing.
You know, Chris, when you talk about the creativity that we have, I do a lot of canning. Try and find canning supplies, try and find lids.
Mhm.
Because what happened last year was more people planted gardens. And all of a sudden you had people that were trying to do the canning. I mean, I wound up having to order my lids off of Amazon for an exorbitant amount of money, but for what I consider, but I think people are learning some of the old ways too.
Mhm. And actually, on just a wellness note, one of the ways to stave off sort of some of the low grade anxiety and depression that can set in is to master something new. And people have been doing that in amazing ways, taking up biking, taking up kayaking, taking up gardening, taking up sewing, I guess taking up oil changes from what it looks like. I'm not sure, but although I did consider whether I could do my own oil change. So I guess. So anyway. So that's kind of that update. Let me share my screen. So this presentation is in response to, I do find it incredibly valuable to sit through the Committee on Administration and the Executive Committee meetings to hear the thinking, the processing, the hard work that those committees do to balance the needs across the county and to try to make good decisions about the expenditure and of resources on a countywide basis. But at the last executive committee meeting, there were some questions about increased human services costs and whether or not those costs were at the expense of other county operations. And so that question intrigued me because I started with the hypothesis that wasn't necessarily true, but I wanted to know for sure based on the data whether or not there was information to support that or not. So that led to kind of another one of those opportunities where it's like what we do is so far-reaching. Like we serve such a wide cross section of persons and focuses, and so I wanted to just do kind of another little review, and then we'll review that information that I sent you. That was what I found out about that, about sort of that question about whether or not the Department of Human Services expenditures have had an impact or a significant impact in other counties' spending. So, share my screen. So, and I'm sorry I can't make this into a full PowerPoint. When I do that, it kind of messes with me. So got to see it in its format here. But so I said, this is a DHS impact statement, stealing that line from Greg. And it's a shameless plug for the good work that we do. So DHS has 6 program areas: behavioral health services, and I listed those services that are a part of that, family and children's services, including child abuse and neglect and youth justice services, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, including all of the aging programs like nutrition and caregiver supports and transportation, economic support, the eligibility determination for Badger Care, child care, and food share benefits, the Birth to 3 program, providing therapies and home teaching case management to little kiddos with delays and disabilities, and then our clerical and fiscal supports. So this is what our staffing currently looks like. There are 95 full and part-time staff, including the director, the deputy director. And then it shows you in each of those sections how many people there are. Economic support has 13, family and children's services has 20. The ADRC has 17, which seems like, in my mind, when I look at the number, seems like a lot. That's largely because that includes all of our meal site dining center coordinators, and a lot of them work 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week, very limited amounts of time, but they're a person, so they're like a body counted in that 95 count. Our clerical supports, our Birth to 3 program, the fiscal staff that we pay for, but I did not include it in our count. So there are 6 finance department staff who serve in some either part or full-time our organization, and then behavioral health at 32. So this is the slide that I sent you a shot of because I wanted you to have it for reference. We wouldn't just kind of glaze through it, then you'd say, what were those numbers? So this gives you two sets of data. One is what were the Department of Human Services actual total expenditures in each of the years from 2015 to 2020. Those are the actual numbers. And I took all of this information from the audit reports. So I believe that to be the most accurate. We have SAP, our financial system, we keep our own running track, all of those sorts of things. But at the end of it all, you've heard me say many times, we'll see what happens when the audit report comes out, because they move all the numbers as they think is most accurate. And so they come out with a final number of what our actual expenditures were, what our actual revenue was, and then what our county levy use was. So these first years through 2020 are all actual numbers based on the audit reports. So you can see that in 2015, we spent about $9.5 million. And that number has gone up. And so I gave you in this middle column, gave you those percentage increases by the year. And then the 2021 and the 2022 numbers are budgeted numbers because obviously those years aren't completed and we don't have audit numbers for those. And then this column here is the levy then. So this again, from 2015 to 2020 is the actual levy. So this takes into consideration, if you've ever sat through, well, those of you who are supervisors have certainly sat through the annual audit report. And for those of you that are citizen members, this takes into account at the end of the year, if the Department of Human Services is in the red, then money is transferred out of the general fund to make us whole. And if the Department of Human Services is in the black, money is transferred from it back into the general fund based on those based on that amount of that we didn't expend. So again, these are the actual numbers for those years of what that levy ask looked like, or what levy turned out to investment actually turned out to be. So in 2015, we had about $3.7 million in levy. 2016, I don't know what happened. It was apparently it was a good year in terms of levy. 2017, and you can see on through there. So you can see that from 2015 to 2020, 2020's levy usage was actually less than 2015's. Then these last two numbers. So this year, our budgeted amount is $4.1 million. You will see when we get to the financial report that conservatively, we are underspending that by, you'll see when we get there, about $700,000. I put $500,000 because that felt safe, which would put our end of the year expenditure at about just under $3.7 million. And then our ask for this next year would be the equivalent of 3.8. In this next slide, the difference between our 2015 and our 2022 levy, what we actually spent, and then now our ask for 2022 is 3.3%. If you started with our salary and fringe numbers for county staff only in 2015 and you added 2% a year up through this coming year, that would add up to over $390,000 in that same period of time. So in terms of sort of levy, our levy projection for this year is under what it was for 2015. So somewhere along the line, we're making up those differences. Between 2010 and 2020, we have returned $656,000 to the general fund per the audit reports. And then between 2015 and 2020, we've utilized $472,000 from the general fund, but the last 2 years have been positives in the amounts of $1 million and $400,000. And again, it looks like we will return at least $500,000 this year, which would essentially leave us at some place around zero for additional general fund usage over the last 5 years between 2015 and 2020. So I'm just going to pause there for a second. Does anyone have questions about that data before I go farther?
No, but thank you for doing this. It's very helpful.
So I wanted to just spend a little bit of time because I also, sadly, listened to the school board proceedings and basically hear about how bad we are. Now, I could blame KT and say we get lumped in with the health department, but whatever that is, Health and Human Services, you know, are the bad guys out to get you. And what I don't think that the average person recognizes is the impact across the board of all of the different areas of focus that we have. So while you may have not you personally, but a person may have a mental vision of the horn-rimmed, prim and proper social worker with her briefcase running out to snatch vulnerable children, that is such a small piece of all of the work that we do. Even if you thought that that was accurate, it's a very small piece of what we do. So I want to just spend a little bit of time because we've typically done some of this with the annual reports and that format has changed. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time giving you a overview of a little bit of the work over the last year. So this first story is a story combining 3 pieces of our behavioral health services section, the crisis program, the comprehensive community services CCS program, and our behavioral health case management, which are the folks that work with people who are on emergency or involuntary commitments or settlement agreements because of mental health or substance use needs. So in 2020, we had a young woman involuntarily hospitalized. So she was emergency detained after she was suicidal. After she spent about 2 weeks in the hospital, she was released to her grandmother or her guardian under court supervision. So she was on either a settlement agreement or a commitment. I'm not sure which one. A settlement agreement is just a shorter term agreement than a commitment order. Over the next months, her mental health struggles continued and a referral was made to CCS to wrap some supports around her. She was voluntarily hospitalized again, and then she made a serious suicide attempt and ended up hospitalized and in a coma for some time. After she was released from the hospital, she started participating actively with CCS, but she was still admitted to the hospital on 3 additional occasions last summer due to being suicidal. However, she's worked really hard with her treatment team. She's engaged in those supports, and she has not needed an inpatient hospitalization, involuntary intervention, or engaged in suicidal behaviors for the last year. So in 2020, we served about 1,450 Dunn County consumers in some facet of behavioral health, which is about 4% of the county's population. Adult Protective Services. So in March of 2021, we had a Adult Protective Service referral for fraud. The allegations were that there was a power of attorney for an elderly gentleman who was in a comatose state in a nursing home who had not been paying for his placement costs. In spite of him having about $600 or $6,000 a month in income, the nursing home reported that the account was about $40,000 in arrears. And at the conclusion of the investigation, it was determined that the power of attorney had been spending the person's money for her personal use, and she was referred for criminal charges. But what was our role in that? So we had a role with law enforcement in collecting all the bank records, in completing investigative interviews. Beyond that, asking the corporation counsel to look or help us to appoint a new decision maker instead of the existing power of attorney. That resulted in a new guardianship, new guardian, and a protective placement order. And then just the complexities of the fact that this was not a simple case because of the ethical issues of a person who had zero say in their state, in their care or in their future because of they were in a vegetative state. So in 2020, we had 276 APS referrals, Adult Protective Services referrals, many of them for financial abuse or mismanagement. This particular case was, it might feel like a fair amount of personal information, but it was actually in the media. So you may have seen it.
Okay.
This was the slide that I referenced earlier, economic support services. So 9,576 persons in Dunn County received healthcare or Badger Care related services in 2020, which is 22% of the county's total population. And this number that I'm about to share felt incredible to me, like uncredible to me. Like, how could that possibly be? The value of the services that were purchased, provided for those 9,500 recipients was $67 million. But if you take $67 million and you divide it by 9,576, which I did, you come out with about $7,000 a person. So you know from healthcare that it doesn't take long to accrue $7,000 worth of services. So this is 67, it's almost $68 million that is back in the local economy as a result. Now, I fully get the argument about, you know, it's tax money and it's and it's coming from somewhere, and I get all of that. But just in terms of impact, when 22% of our population qualify for Badger Care, and that put $67 million worth into our local economy, that's a significant impact. There were just under 5,000 people who received food share benefits, which is about 11% of our population. And then there were 167 kiddos who received childcare. So if you are low enough income that you can qualify to have assistance with paying your childcare costs so you can go to work and have your child in quality childcare, 167 kiddos received that benefit at an average of about $4,200 per child. That also went directly to local childcare providers. This is a story from Wendy Sterry, who's one of our ADRC information assistance options counselors. So she encountered a person who was in a nursing home and had run out of money. She couldn't live independently, and she wanted to stay in the nursing home, but she couldn't afford it. She needed to get onto medical assistance in order to have publicly funded long-term care, but her home was in a trust, and all of her family lived out of state and were unable to help her. She needed to get the necessary documentation from the bank, but it would have cost her $100 to go from the nursing home that she was in to the bank and back to get the documentation that she needed. And she couldn't afford that. She was anxious, overwhelmed. She had become suicidal and was expressing that she just wanted to die. So the INA, Wendy, the Information and Assistance Specialist, Wendy, was able to go to the bank, go to the funeral home, obtain all the necessary documents, and help her fill them out so that she could become enrolled in publicly funded long-term care. And her anxiety improved, she was relieved, and she no longer expressed that she wanted to die. This story is a little convoluted, so I'm going to give you the front and the back of it, only because it uses a lot of like words that I should have thought through before I put them in there. But anyway, mom of a disabled 50-year-old man called and asked why her son was responsible for paying his Medicare Part B plan premium. And he had been receiving SSI, Social Security or Supplement Security income since his dad had passed away. There is a benefit because the son was disabled. There's a benefit from the parent. It's called the disability adult child benefit that he was eligible for. Anyway, if you read that whole middle section, it would just tell you there was a lot of moving pieces between all the different programs of Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare. And the end result was that there was also an error made in the case at some point in time. So the benefit specialist, Lisa Schuler, contacted the Great Rivers Consortium, helped to work out all the logistics of what was right, what was wrong, what had happened. And the end result was that the Medicare savings plan backdated his eligibility back to 10/1 of 16, resulted in a $6,900 reimbursement to the consumer and a $1,348 ongoing monthly benefit. So her work helped to not only answer the question about why he was paying for his premium, but get that managed in a different way that he was eligible for. Children's long-term support waiver. So a 10-year-old child with triplegia, I don't know, so I had to look it up, is the paralysis of one arm and both legs. She uses a wheelchair for mobility and for positioning, and she had several different mobility devices and things, but they were all bulky, they weren't waterproof, they didn't fit in their cars. If the family needed to go somewhere, they'd take two vehicles. She couldn't play with her siblings outside. So we were able to, through the Children's Long-Term Support Waiver Program, help the family to purchase a Firefly mobile seating device that was waterproof enough, small enough to fit in the family vehicle, helped her to be positioned safely and supported. She could now sit in the shallow end of a pool or a lake, in a sandbox, without having to have a parent or another caregiver with her. She could be with her siblings without adult supervision and play. She had new freedom that she hadn't previously had, and the family could all go in one vehicle together. This simple chair removed many of the barriers for the family, and they were able to plan many more outings without the stress of wondering if there would be accommodations, and they could only take the one, and they only had to take the one vehicle. So probably a relatively inexpensive purchase of equipment that helped them to have newfound freedoms. This isn't so much a story from Family and Children's Services as just a kind of a reiteration from the mouths of the managers about what I've part of what I've been saying to you for the last several months, but or while anyway. But so Family and Children's Services is responsible for child protective services, youth justice work, family treatment court, out-of-home care. We've typically had a lot of kids in out-of-home care, especially in the last years due to methamphetamine and mental health things. And so they have worked really hard over the last, since 2018, to try to bring those numbers down. So first off, they implemented what they call out-of-home placement staffings every month. The managers and several workers pick a selection of the kiddos that were placed out of the home to have a really in-depth conversation about, to look closely at the needs of the family, the barriers to reunification, if there are any other safe permanent outcomes for the child. And every social worker walks away from the staffing with at least 3 actionable items that they can take to try to find permanency or reunification. They've been hugely successful. The second thing that they believe have dropped their numbers is for both child protection and youth justice is that we were able to add 2 additional staff in the last biennium. This brought our caseload counts down from 20 to 25 cases per staff down into the teens, sometimes even into the lower teens. The smaller caseloads provides the social workers with time to truly connect children and youth and their families. They're able to build partnerships, relationships with the families, do creative work, and have better outcomes. So in 2018, we had 57 kids in out-of-home care. In 2019, we had 37. In 2020, we had 39. In 2021, we now have 25. Our out-of-home placement numbers right now are projecting at about $500,000, which in 2018, they were over $1 million. So overall, we've been able to decrease those placements while many of our surrounding counties continue to struggle. And then lastly, they can't not be everybody's favorite because they're like the nicest human beings in the entire planet. But the birth to 3 staff do early intervention for little kiddos under the age of 3 who have a disability or a delay, providing OT, PT, speech, language services, and then home teaching and case management. And these are just some of the comments that have been made about them recently. Vicki and Mary helped our family immensely during a very difficult and challenging stage in our life. They helped our daughter overcome some daunting obstacles. Beyond that, they are just some of the most pleasant and dear people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing, and I miss them. Thank you for your incredible program that changes lives. We're so grateful to have been a part of it. Love the Birth to 3 program and the workers. They're the best. All 3 of my children have been in the program, and my only regret is not starting my oldest sooner. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for the incredible service you've provided to Joshua. I was very impressed by the level of service and the care extended to Ben and our family. Staff always were warm and friendly, professional, so much so that I'll miss them, especially Natalie and Vicki. Awesome people. And then this actually just came yesterday. So today I had a visit from Mary, with Mary, who's one of the providers, and this little person's mom. She said that when she started, she didn't know anything about our program, but we had put her at ease and she felt heard. She said she was at the point in her life where she was overwhelmed, and we helped with that and made it so she felt that she could do it. She said she didn't know anything about sensory processing and has learned so much from us that she's not wanting to let us to go. She's happy to have children's waiver being presented to her and the ability to get some equipment that's needed. So I just, part of my job is to advocate for the organization that I serve. And I just always want you to keep in mind, but you also know that I'm going to be as transparent as I can possibly be with you about kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I just wanted to kind of, as we continue to work through what we're working through, budget-wise, COVID-wise, all those different pieces, just give you a little bit of a picture of our organization. Questions?
Any questions for Chris on this excellent presentation? I see none.
All right. So really quick, just a housing study update. You guys approved the county moving forward with the housing study. Diane and Dave have been working with the municipalities to see who's in. City of Menominee's in. Boyceville, can't really tell, might be. Other municipalities probably not. So we're close to just sort of getting to a like, all right, let's just go. Let's move forward, figure out what we've got, what it's going to cost, what we need in order to support that cost, and go forward. So I would anticipate that's going to happen in the next month.
Chairman
David?
Bartlett.
So did Lynn Nelson or somebody from that organization meet with Outbound in Boyceville?
Susan Badke and I met with the Boyceville board. Susan met with the Colfax board, and we have had no interest, despite repeated phone calls and emails from me, in Elk Mound.
Okay.
Colfax is probably not interested. Excuse me. Yeah, Supervisor Steen will ask you that in a minute. It looks like Boyceville may well participate in that they would like to have their own study done.
Yeah, when I talked to Luke Montgomery from Boyceville and Steve Abramson, I can't remember exactly, from Elk Mountain, they both sounded like they did want to participate. So I'm a little surprised on Elk Mountain, but I hope Boyceville.
I hope so too. Their board was quite receptive, I thought.
Okay.
Okay. So that's just a quick update on that. And then just a real quick look, again, because last month we just did a budget review, kind of did the line by line, gave you the entire budget spending packet last month. This month I just did the summary for you. If at any point in time that doesn't work and you want me to give you the whole packet every month, I can definitely do that. It's just a lot of trees die for that sacrifice, especially when our financial picture looks solid. So kind of jumping to the bottom line. So we were, our budget at the ask had a $4.178 million levy ask. And with bills paid through July and revenue received through June, we were projecting at 3.4 million, which would return $766,000 to the general fund. And I will tell you, I probably shouldn't say this because I'll probably jinx it, but I'll tell you that's it's also a very, very conservative number. It's more than that, but I don't want to trust that this early in the year. So this is where I was speaking to those kind of like, I don't know what that's all about. I don't know why we're not spending money, other than I think the whole world is a little unpredictable right now. So we'll take it.
Yeah, and that's just 6 months of financial data too.
Yeah, the issue is that the later you get in the year, though, the less the anomalies matter. Because if you have a person who goes into a high-end expensive placement in January, you're going to pay for that high-end expensive placement likely all through the year. You have a person who goes into a high-end expensive placement in October, you're going to pay for it for 3 months. So big numbers start to have less and less impact as the year goes on, which makes me more and more confident in the numbers then that they'll hold.
Supervisor Steen, you had your hand up when we were talking about the housing study and I neglected you. I am so sorry.
Don't be sorry. I was in favor of the housing study. I got outvoted on the village board. So I was not able to prevail, which I feel bad about, but that's the way it went.
Well, and the townships and villages will still be a part of the larger study. They simply just will not have the detailed portfolio that spending $1,000 or $2,000 would provide them. So we thought it was time to move on.
Yeah,
That's all I got.
All right. We have some action items to deal with. First of all, we have, and it was in your packet, you have the August vouchers paid in the amount of $574,918. I need a motion to note review of the August vouchers paid.
I'll make a motion.
Ms. Barker moves. Is there a second?
I will.
Mr. Lamb, any questions, discussion? Supervisor Bjork.
I really hate to be a broken record on this, but I just don't think having expenditures that are just identified by house calls of menominee are adequate. I see my job as trying to find out where the money goes. And if the money goes to an individual, I think it should be printed. And it was a couple months ago. And I don't want to be irritated, but I think about it a lot during the day, and I can't understand why, when we tout ourselves as being so transparent, that we throw a cover over house calls of menominee. If it was called something not so flattering as house calls, I don't have any idea what it should be called or what their thinking is, but I think we ought to know where the money goes, and this doesn't tell me where the money goes. So I can't support this motion. Thank you.
And as Chris has reported on a number of occasions, it is largely staffing. They are contracted staff.
It's all staffing.
I realize that, but they all have names.
Well, but we don't report to the board the salaries of our county employees.
I guess it's public record, isn't it? I mean, if I needed to know what somebody made in the county, I certainly could find out. I mean, I don't know why I don't know why we need to cloak it.
What I would say is, so it is public record. It's also the house calls data is all public record too, and I do believe we have listed out those expenditures. But I also believe that, hearing what you said, I think we can find a solution.
Thanks. Dr. Hall, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just that, I agree that it's certainly more useful from somebody looking at it from the outside. If, when we get a report and just say this much was spent on contract staff, this much was spent on, so kind of understanding what that kind of big bin of house calls and it could just say this much was spent on contract staff for this many FTEs. And I think that would be sufficient and perhaps more descriptive of where the money is actually going. So perhaps that's useful to think about.
And I would just say one other thing. Know that the purpose of this action, this specific action, is to note the review of vouchers paid. So to alter this data, which comes directly out of the financial system, would not be accurate because those were the vouchers paid to those various entities. But I do believe that there's a remedy that we can meet that need that we can implement.
Right. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor to note review of the August vouchers paid. We ready to call the question? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Supervisor Bjork is opposed. Let's note that in the record. And then we have 3 budget adjustments. The first is a DHS budget adjustment in the amount of $250,000. Chris, do you want to just say a word about that, and then I'll ask for a motion?
We talked a little bit about this last month in the budget review. This is a cleanup. We included this in the 2022 budget. We're putting a placeholder because the county board does not meet in December, because the last time that we could have a budget adjustment approved by the county board would be the November meeting. And in order to do that, we'd have to have any budget adjustment to you by the October meeting. We will receive revenue after October that we need to be able to expend if it's received, grant adjustments, things like that. So this is just a placeholder. We will not spend the money unless there's a direct revenue source for that, but it allows, one of the authorities that you give is the cap on the top of the amount of money that can be spent. And if we don't add this cap, we can't spend those additional funding sources that are received late in the year.
Okay, with that explanation for this placeholder budget adjustment, I would like a motion to approve. Supervisor Kennedy, Supervisor Cromery seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, everybody. I can't always hear you, but I think that was a unanimous aye. And finally, we have, we have a public health budget adjustment, which, as KT indicated to you, was a way of sort of cleaning up the budget. So I will need a motion on this, motion and second on this as well.
So moved.
Supervisor Sheen moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Lamb, seconds. Any discussion? Questions? All in favor of the DHS budget adjustment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Budget adjustment for public health passes. And finally, a resolution establishing a room and board fee schedule for the Department of Human Services. Motion, please, on this.
I'll make a motion.
Ms. Barker moves. Is there a second? Supervisor Kennedy. Chris, do you want to say a word about this? The language is a little
Yes. So
bureaucratic.
in 2019, actually, the state of Wisconsin changed an administrative rule called DHS 1, which governs how we are able to collect for various services, mostly in the behavioral health world, various services. And And so one of the things that one change that was introduced was to require annual county board approval of the rate setting. So we worked for the better part of the last year and a half to try to figure out an equitable way to recoup some of the cost for persons that are in placements, and settled upon $25 a day, which comes out to about $600 a month. This would be for persons. So we tried to find a mechanism that would allow us to fairly implement it to a kind of a broad cross section of individuals. And so that dollar amount we came upon was $25 a day, $600 a month, and it requires your approval in order for us to implement that. I would say one other thing, the state, as a part of DHS 1, also sets up what's called a uniform fee scale. It basically looks at the amount of income that someone accrues or has, and then it attaches a dollar amount, like a sliding fee scale. It starts at about $1,800 a month for a single individual before you have to pay anything. So if you were going to come into our outpatient clinic and you didn't have any source of insurance, if you made under about $1,800 a month, you would have no ability to pay, and we wouldn't be able to charge you anything. And it starts at like $1 and $3 and $5. So this is a little bit outside of that, because one of the changes that happened in DHS 1 was that it took away any guidance that it provided around placements. So we had to kind of create our own, but it's keeping in mind that there's another whole structure that allows people to have relatively significant income before they have, not significant, because $1,800 isn't a lot, but they have to have something above sort of poverty level without having to have an ability to pay. So,
Dr. Hall.
So I have two questions. The first, is this something new that we've never charged people for this before, right? So the question is this completely new? And then the second question is, so that universal fee schedule, I just want to make sure, so that will apply for this room and board fee, so that, you know, somebody who maybe is making $2,400 a month isn't then on the hook for a $600 bill that they won't have any other means to pay.
So first question, it is not new. What we've historically done, but I want to say inconsistently, we needed a mechanism, and this is a lot of the work we've done over the last year. And in another month, I'm going to bring you the fees for our outpatient services and all of those sorts of pieces, because we need to do the same thing with that. But a lot of the work that we've done was to figure out something that we could consistently apply that didn't involve a ton of on case by case kind of determination, because then the more case by case that you go, the more room there is for things to be for human interpretation. You know, like, oh, that person's circumstances versus that person's circumstances. So what historically would happen would be that we would, if someone went into a placement and they had an ability to pay, like because they had an SSI or a Social Security payment or a veterans payment that we could divert to us to help pay their costs. We had that, but they were allowed to keep a certain amount of that for $65 for their incidental costs. But what we found was, if we took all of people's money to cover their placement costs, then they didn't have a cell phone, they couldn't find a job, they didn't, they might lose their car because they couldn't pay their car insurance. So we tried to figure out if someone had about that SSI payment group, which is about $867 a month for a lot of people. We looked at that group, like, what would be a reasonable amount of money that we could recoup because we're paying all of their costs, their daily living costs, except those incidental costs, but also allow us to not have to do that case by case determination. So it's not new, it's just more consistently applied. And then the ability to pay doesn't kick in until the person's done. So if they pay their $25 a month, and we recoup those costs, and we have lots and lots of people that we do that with, that have a regular form of payment in SSI or veterans or other things, Social Security, disability, and if they pay that going forward, their responsibility is satisfied. If they accrue that $25 a month, they get out of the placement, we're going to use the ability to pay to continue to assess for the next 3 years whether or not they can pay that, at some point in time. So if they leave that placement and they suddenly are, not suddenly, but they are, they have much improved functioning and they go back to work and we can recoup those costs, some of that cost, then we will apply the ability to pay determination at that point in time. So then we would look at, well, I'm working at Anderson Windows and I'm making X amount of dollars a month, and I could pay this based on the ability to pay fee schedule. I could pay this much towards my former bill, essentially.
That answer your question? Any further questions or discussion? Supervisor Bjork?
I just wanted to ask, what are some examples of placements that you're talking about? Are you talking about people that are put in jail or foster care or what? And how many days are we talking about?
So these would be adults. They're not incarcerations. They're people who are subject to being on a mental health commitment, but not able to be safely maintained in the community. And so they would generally be placed into like a group care type of facility or an adult family home. In kiddos, it's called foster care. With adults, it's called an adult family home. It can be licensed for up to 4 individuals. A group home usually is up to 8 individuals. There are also some that are larger than that, but it would be that type of a facility. And or like Trempealeau County Healthcare Center, which is an institute for mental disease. And they're a large facility and they have a number of beds, but it could be any of those kinds of placement facilities. Number of days totally varies. Could be someone might be able to go for a month or 6 weeks and be stabilized. Some people will end up staying in a placement for upwards of a year or more.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or discussion on this? All in favor of this resolution establishing room and board fee schedules for the Department of Human Services, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? This passes. And that's our action agenda for tonight. Supervisor Kennedy.
Yes, I have a couple things I want to bring up. The neighbors of Dunn County are selling cookbooks for $12 to raise funds to buy a new bus. So if anyone is interested, all they have to do is go over there and call the front desk if they'd like a cookbook. This is the 3rd one. The first 2 were made when it was the Dunn County Healthcare Center. This is the first one that's been done by the neighbors of Dunn County. So
Great Christmas presents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good Christmas presents. And they have a lot of good recipes in it. Some the residents put in and a lot of them the staff put in.
Good.
And then they're having another fundraiser. And unfortunately, I don't have all the data with me, but in October, they're going to do a fun run. So I can get more information on it, but it's going to be between the different buildings and possibly the different county entities also. So I just thought people would be interested.
It is the 23rd of October. and
Yeah.
it as a fundraiser which anyone can participate in for a walk or a run, and other food trucks and entertainment options.
Excellent.
I don't know.
Have they thought about selling the cookbooks on their Facebook page?
That I don't know. That I don't know.
It's not on there. The fun run is, but it's not on there. And I'm
Well,
just thinking to reach more people.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I
I
just
can
got,
send her a note and suggest that.
yes, I've just heard about it by word of mouth. I mean, I have both of the other ones. They're kind of old and falling apart now from the Dutch Healthcare Center.
So you definitely have to buy the new one.
Yes, and they have,
Yeah,
but it's
absolutely.
really good recipes. And $12 is, and they did a good job at binding it and everything. So I'm just gonna put a plug in for the neighbors.
Excellent. Excellent. Supervisor Steen, did you have an
Thank you.
announcement?
Nope.
Okay.
Well,
Chairman
Dave
Bartlett.
does.
Dave does.
Chairman Bartlett.
Thank you. I want to thank Chris for the information tonight. It was very enlightening. Thank you. The other thing I'd like to bring up is Child Care Partnership Services has been in contact with me, much like a lot of other entities out there over ARPA funds. And I explained that there's probably no ARPA funds at this time available, is what we've decided for a board. But talking with them over the lack of child care in our county and what obstacles they have is one of them is just getting the word out of their services, that if a family has a lower paying job and they're paying out a lot in childcare, they have to make the decision, do they stay home and take care of their kids or not when both are working? And sometimes they might be able to take in another child or two. And this agency they'll train them, certify them for free. If they wanted to go for more kiddos, they would help with some of that funding, or at least help them get with the information of what they have to do. They don't have a lot of funding available either, but they do have some. But the bottom line is, what I was wondering is, we as a county, and I'm starting with you, Chris, is can we somehow get the word out to new families, lower income people that might be, be able to do this, that it might work out for them. I know when I worked many years ago, when my kids were little, I had two people that worked for me, that their wives decided to stay home and take care of their kids, and took in a couple of other kids, neighbors or whatever, and made a little bit of money. And when they looked at the money, what they were making for their job, I remember one was a CNA, worked at the Chippewa Hospital, and the other one was a waitress. When they looked at what they had to pay out for childcare and what they could get for taking in a couple of children, that they were better off staying home and taking care of a couple of other children and staying home with their own kids. And, maybe that's something, if we could get the word out, because evidently, listening to these people, childcare is much needed in our county.
Absolutely.
And, it all has to do with housing and jobs. It's all tied together, but I'm asking if there's something the county could do to help get the word out for them.
So it's been a while since I've heard anything from them. I know that they've done a ton of work over to the east, like a Clark County, and I mean, some of those places have just like huge, I mean, they just call them childcare deserts, just like food deserts, you know, where there's just not childcare, entire county that has like one childcare provider. But yeah, we can circle back. What's their name again, Dave?
It's Child Care Partnership Services, and it's Renee Emsing. She's the director. She's supposed to be emailing me some information so I can share it with people, but she hasn't yet. But I just, I don't know if there's a need and if we could help somebody out, you know.
Yep, I'll just make sure at least that the places that families touch here, particularly in those childcare determinations, are aware of the resource.
Yeah.
Right.
And certainly, I mean, you're right to bring that up, Chairman Bartlett. There certainly is a need for childcare. Any other comments, suggestions, announcements? If not, we will see you all on October 28th, with the exception of Dr. Hall, who we will miss. Stay safe and stay healthy. Everyone, wear your mask. We are adjourned without objection.